Here's your wrestling news for November 27th, 2021. And your headlines for today include the absurd fallout of Roman Reigns' next challenger on Smackdown, Bryan Danielson considers current AEW contract his last year's as a full-time wrestler, Becky Lynch accidentally leaked news about Ronda Rousey's WWE return, what lies ahead for Holland following his debut disaster on Smackdown, the tensions between Sonya Deville and Naomi keep mounting on Smackdown, WWE reveals Edge's return and matches for Raw next week, WWE Studios animated movie Rumble set for Paramount Plus release date, reasons why Sami Zayn is Roman Reigns' next Universal title challenger, role of Brock Lesnar and Drew McIntyre, and more. We're kicking off with Smackdown, as this week's episode was focused on Roman Reigns finding his next challenger, which despite recent booking wasn't King Woods, who didn't even show up to Smackdown. Instead, a Black Friday Battle Royal main evented the show to determine the next #1 contender for the Universal Championship, though the threat of Brock Lesnar's suspension being lifted hung over Reigns like a dark cloud. On a side note, Drew McIntyre and Jeff Hardy teamed to defeat Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss, and while it wasn't too relevant to the Universal title picture at this point, the two faces will have a role to play in the future. Surprisingly, McIntyre wasn't picked for the Battle Royal, which his old nemesis Sheamus found hilarious, but he still came out swinging his sword before Adam Pearce was forced to eject him. So why did Drew not make the cut? Well, we know that both in real life and in kayfabe, Reigns has influence over the show, and it was likely WWE's subtle way of saying that the Tribal Chief is avoiding facing the former WWE champion, a fantastic bit of storytelling that'll hopefully pay off after WrestleMania 38. Outside of storylines, we can only imagine that this was WWE continuing to keep Drew out of the world title picture after a lengthy run in 2020. In the match, Jeff Hardy thought he'd won when he eliminated Happy Corbin until Sami Zayn came in to throw him out, earning himself a title shot in a nice bit of subtle storytelling. After all, it was Hardy who defeated Zayn to remove the latter from SmackDown's Men's Survivor Series team, and now Sami has gotten his revenge, all while teasing that Jeff will face Reigns one day. Hardy's been on a roll since moving to SmackDown, even getting the pin in the aforementioned tag match, and his impressive showing last night comes just days after an interview where he spoke about wanting to face Reigns, arguing that he belongs in that story. Before Sami could celebrate for too long, Kayla Braxton announced that Brock Lesnar's suspension has been lifted and he'll be back next week, much to the anger of Zayn and disbelief of Reigns. Adam Pearce wasn't too happy about the announcement either, and Reigns went off the air with a great buzz, as this was one of the few times this year WWE accomplished so much with so little. We have some big news concerning Ronda Rousey. We all know Rousey had an impressive run in the company since her debut in 2018. She won the WWE Raw Women's Championship and carried it for half a year. Rousey was last seen at WrestleMania 35 and has been absent from WWE television since then. Many fans wonder when Ronda Rousey will return to the company. Earlier this year, WWE President Nick Khan stated Rousey would make her return at a certain point in time. While speaking with Graham GSM Matthews of Bleacher Report, Becky Lynch hinted at facing off against Ronda Rousey in a singles match somewhere down the line. We have a lot of people. Then, of course, is Ronda Rousey going to be chomping at the bit to get back now that she sees what I've accomplished? Maybe she'd want to accomplish the same. Maybe she'll want to get retribution for the loss I gave her at WrestleMania 35. That same loss that's caused me to be champion ever since. There are a lot of options. Ronda Rousey's WWE contract had expired earlier this year, so it's not known when she will make her return to the company. Perhaps it might still be a long time until fans see her back in a WWE ring. WWE doesn't necessarily need Rousey in order to strengthen their women's division, as Charlotte, Asuka, Rhea Ripley, Sasha Banks, Bianca Belair, and Bayley are all thriving on their own, but in terms of crossover appeal, there's no denying what Rousey brings to the table. What do you think about Rousey coming back to WWE? Sound off in the comments below. Over to AEW, as Bryan Danielson has made an impression since joining a few months ago and is the current #1 contender for the AEW World title. Even before leaving WWE in April, Bryan spoke openly about how he realizes his career is coming to an end as he wants to spend more time with his growing family. Speaking to Busted Open Radio this week, the former WWE World Champion discussed his current deal with AEW and how much longer he'll consider himself a wrestler. I signed a 3-year contract with AEW. I consider these kind of like my final 3 years as a full-time wrestler, but also, I'm just like, okay, this me winding down. This to me is the peak. This is going to be the best that I'm ever going to be, and ending my full-time career at that, ending it as the best version of myself. It's ultimately up to Bryan Danielson as to what he does next, as odds are that he'll always have a ring to wrestle in, but he may not want to make the travel every week to perform. There's always the possibility that he could sign another full-time contract with AEW or even a different contract to work with them backstage once this is up, but for now, Danielson's current deal is expected to be his first, last, and only contract as a full-time wrestler for Tony Khan. More from Smackdown as Holland made his blue brand in-ring debut, where he was booked to face Cesaro in probably his biggest WWE match to date. Sheamus accompanied Holland to the ring, but things didn't play out as they'd hoped, as Cesaro walked away with the win after a roll-up pin, getting a measure of revenge on the two men who cost him a spot at Survivor Series. Both Holland and Sheamus were furious, and it was a very rough start for the man rumored to be viewed as a future WWE World Champion backstage. The start to his SmackDown career hasn't indicated any such future plans from WWE, but hopefully the defeat won't affect him at all in the long run. As long as Holland keeps getting TV time and is associated with Sheamus, then it could be smooth sailing, even if he was also eliminated by Cesaro in the Black Friday Battle Royal. With that said, we used to say the same for Karrion Kross, that a series of losses early on were actually good for him, as it would only mark the start of a lengthy, dominant run on the main roster, and look how that turned out. SmackDown also saw the next evolution in Naomi's feud with Sonya Deville, as Sasha Banks is fully on side with the Glow. Confronting Deville, the boss argued that as SmackDown's team captain, she should have been given the right to pick her own Survivor Series team, and that if Naomi were on her side, they would have won last Sunday. It was a fair point by Banks, who questioned why Deville has a grudge against Naomi, but WWE's authority figure denied any claims of bias and instead allowed Banks to team with Naomi to face Natalya and Shayna Baszler that same night. A fun tag match that saw Naomi get the win for her team, it proved why the former SmackDown Women's Champion is such an asset for the show, all while Deville was on commentary denying any sort of grudge or wrongdoing. However, Banks' point was proven when Naomi confronted Sonya, and while the latter didn't react, the tension between them seems to be reaching a boiling point. As entertaining as this story is, we don't see it culminating until Deville officially makes her formal in-ring return, and there's no word on when that'll be. Over to Raw, as the Red Brand is continuing to try and win back fans they've lost over the past year, and a huge return could do that in just a few days' time. During SmackDown, it was revealed that Edge will be returning to Raw next week, his first appearance on Raw since being drafted to the Red Brand in October. It wasn't noted what Edge will be doing, but he could have plenty of potential opponents, and could also announce himself for the 2022 Men's Rumble match. Next week's Raw will also see Seth Rollins face Finn Balor, a match that was meant to happen this week but didn't take place. WWE Champion Big E will take on Kevin Owens in non-title action, and with AEW set to host Dynamite at the same arena just 2 days later, we'll have to see what WWE does to win fans to their side. But who do you want to see Edge go against when he returns? Let us know in the comments. In 2019, WWE announced a brand new animated movie, Rumble, which is finally set to be released. Originally planned to come out in cinemas in July 2020, that obviously didn't happen due to the global situation, and this week, it was confirmed that Rumble will release on December 15th as an exclusive for Paramount Plus with no theatrical release. The film, which stars Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Will Arnett, Terry Crews, Michael Buffer, and others, focuses on a world where pro wrestling is done by hulking monsters, and fans will get to see it next month, but only with Paramount. And we're ending today with Sami Zayn, the #1 contender for the Universal Championship. It's a role Sami deserves after years of giving his all, but as much as we hate to say it, his story may only amount to a filler feud with Roman Reigns. The heel versus heel dynamic is something WWE doesn't like to do too often, and it's interesting that this time a year ago, Reigns was feuding with Sami's best friend Kevin Owens. Unlike the Owens story though, don't expect this feud with Sami Zayn to be a drawn-out affair, because if WWE has plans for a pay-per-view match, Sami has to wait a little over a month until WWE Day 1 on January 1st, 2022. To be honest, we can't see the Reigns vs. Zayn feud going that far, and in all likeliness, it'll be a small feud solely on TV that'll result in a quick match and a win for the Tribal Chief. Not only is Sami being used as a filler feud, but this story may only be a stepping stone for bigger things with bigger names. For one, Brock Lesnar is returning to WWE next week and will presumably resume his feud with the Tribal Chief, building towards their eventual WrestleMania 38 main event. Second, Jeff Hardy has been earning momentum on SmackDown and could serve as Reigns' first opponent of the new year after Zayn, just as long as he keeps picking up wins. Third, Drew McIntyre was conveniently omitted from the Battle Royal, which we've predicted is down to the Tribal Chief, and WWE doesn't even want to entertain the idea of Reigns vs. McIntyre happening on TV or a B pay-per-view. Drew McIntyre vs. Roman Reigns is another inevitable clash, and this isn't even accounting for the fact that the Roman Reigns-King Woods feud isn't done at all. With 4 likely future opponents already lined up, Zayn is in the middle of an unfortunate situation where his program with the head of the table will be in the background and a launch pad for bigger feuds next year. If it's any consolation, at least Zayn is getting a title shot, and win, lose, or draw, that's something many superstars don't even receive. Do you agree that Zayn is a filler feud for the head of the table? And who would you like to see challenge for the Universal Championship next? Sound off in the comments, and thanks for watching. Well guys, that's our news for today. Please share your comments below. Also hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to receive all notifications. And as always, thanks for watching.